My name is Alina, and at 38 I find myself walking a fine line between comfort and quiet heartbreak. I work in a beauty salon tucked in a corner of our small suburban neighborhood, a place I've grown to love not for its glamour, but for the calm rhythm of it. Waxing facials, massages. I get to touch lives, listen to stories, and in small ways help people feel whole again. It's not a job my husband ever approved of, though. He's 15 years older than me and wears his disapproval like a second skin. To him, my work is frivolous, too intimate, too exposed. But he's always been stingy, careful with every coin and colder with his affections. So I keep working. I have to. And truthfully, I want to. Our marriage has long since shifted into something more functional than romantic. We're housemates now, polite but distant, sharing a roof and the occasional chore, little more. The love we once had faded quietly, like wallpaper yellowing in a sunlit room. Then there's my son. 17. His name is Marco. And while the rest of my world feels gray and mechanical, he remains the only part still painted in color. He's thoughtful in ways that make my heart ache, always offering to carry the groceries, rubbing my shoulders after a long shift, watching me with a kind of attentiveness that no one else does anymore. Sometimes I wonder if he sees the tired sadness I try to keep buried beneath my makeup. Last Tuesday was one of those dragging days where my feet ached from standing too long, and my arms were sore from working out stubborn knots and too many backs. When I came home, the house smelled of freshly brewed tea and something lemony, my favorite. Marco had cooked. "You should sit, Mom," he said as I walked in. "I made lemon chicken. And there's chamomile tea, your usual." I smiled, grateful and a little emotional. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." There it was again, that quiet insistence, like he knew I needed something soft to land on, even if I wasn't ready to admit it. We ate in the living room, the television humming in the background, though neither of us paid much attention to it. Our dinners had become like that lately, not rushed or awkward but quietly intimate, comfortable. His voice had deepened over the past year, and sometimes when he spoke I found myself startled by how much like a man he sounded. He asked me about my day, really asked, and listened like every word mattered. My husband never does that. Not anymore. "Did anyone give you trouble today?" he asked, passing me a bowl of rice. I chuckled softly. "No, just the usual. People who think waxing is magic and forget that pain's part of the process." He grinned, a flash of his boyish self in the curve of his lips. "Well, you make magic happen anyway. You always have." That stopped me. He looked at me with eyes that didn't quite belong to a boy anymore, and something about it made my chest tighten. Later that night I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair. My robe hung loosely on my shoulders and I studied my reflection. Lines had begun to form around my eyes, soft but insistent. I wasn't old, not yet, but I wasn't young either. Time was doing its work, gentle but firm. Marco knocked lightly on my bedroom door. "Come in," I said, expecting him to ask about school or maybe borrow my charger again. But he lingered at the doorway, hesitant. "I just wanted to say good night." I turned, offering him a soft smile. "Good night, sweetheart." He stepped closer, then paused. "You looked really tired earlier. You sure you're okay?" I nodded. "I am now." He leaned down, kissed the top of my head. And in that moment something settled into the room. Not tension exactly, but a presence, charged and silent. I felt it like a shift in gravity. He left, the door clicking quietly shut behind him. And I stood there, still in my robe, brushing my hair, trying to understand why the air had suddenly grown so warm. It had been a long Tuesday. The kind where every appointment seemed to bleed into the next, and my hands ached from the constant motion. I hadn't even taken my usual afternoon break, choosing instead to power through with lukewarm coffee and the dim hope that the day would end quickly. My back ached. My mind buzzed. The salon finally emptied around 7. I began tidying up, folding towels, wiping down surfaces, dimming the overhead lights, when the soft chime of the front door startled me. I turned, expecting a forgetful client or a delivery mistake. But it was Marco. He walked in casually, his frame now familiar and undeniably grown, a bottle of wine in one hand and a soft smile tugging at his lips. "Hey," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He held up the bottle, giving it a light shake. "I figured you'd be tired. I thought, maybe you deserve to relax tonight." There was something in his voice, gentle, confident. Not a boy playing grown-up, but a young man who understood exactly what he was doing. I smiled despite myself, shaking my head. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he cut in just as he had so many times before. He poured the wine into one of the salon's clean glass tumblers and handed it to me. Then he stepped back and gestured toward the couch in the back corner of the studio, where we sometimes took breaks between appointments. "Come on," he said. "Tonight's not about work. It's about you." Still dressed in my uniform, a simple black wrap dress slightly smeared with essential oils, I hesitated. But his expression was so sincere, his posture so at ease, that I found myself obeying without thinking. I took the glass and walked to the couch. The room was dim now, the soft overhead bulbs casting a gentle amber glow. I eased myself down, curling my legs beside me. Marco sat on the edge of the couch, took a sip of wine, then placed his glass on the table. "Lay back," he said softly. "Let me take care of you tonight." I blinked at him, caught off guard. "What are you doing?" His smile widened slightly. "You give massages all day long. I thought maybe just once you should be the one to relax." Before I could reply, he reached out and gently took my feet into his hands. I tensed instinctively, an old habit, but his touch was light, respectful. He started slow, thumbs pressing just enough to relieve tension, not overwhelm. "You're always on your feet," he murmured. "I don't know how you do it." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Neither do I." His hands moved up, patient and deliberate. Ankles, calves. He never said a word out of place, never rushed. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was warm, filled with trust and something deeper I couldn't quite name. When he reached my knees, he paused. "Here," he said, gently taking the glass from my hand. "Turn over. I'll do your back." His tone was casual, but there was a current in it, soft and steady. I hesitated only a moment before laying on my stomach, resting my cheek against the arm of the couch. My breath slowed, the scent of lavender still lingering in the room from the last client. Marco's hands resumed their path, this time starting at the soles of my feet, gliding up the backs of my legs. He worked quietly, his fingers knowing, careful not to cross any line, and yet something in me shifted. I wasn't just tired. I was melting under the weight of being seen, truly seen, not just as a mother or a worker, but as a woman who hadn't been touched with care in a very long time. His palms pressed into my lower back, thumbs drawing slow, gentle circles. The tension I had carried for months began to unspool. Every motion was wordless, but I heard the intention in his silence. Eventually, his hands moved higher over my shoulders to the base of my neck. "I'll do your scalp," he murmured. "You always say it's your favorite." I nodded, eyes closed now, lost in a haze of warmth and surrender. He knelt behind me, his fingers threading through my hair, massaging my scalp with the softest, most reverent touch. I exhaled a shuddering breath. No one had touched me like this in years. No one had ever taken the time. Time stopped. I wasn't thinking about boundaries or roles or what this looked like from the outside. I was thinking only of how his touch made me feel safe, cherished. When he finally stopped, he sat beside me, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I opened my eyes, met his gaze. "I think I've never felt more okay," I whispered. And I meant it. The last traces of light filtered through the window blinds, streaking the room in long amber slants that clung to the walls like fading memories. I was still lying on the couch, my body loose and warm from Marco's hands, when I heard the soft click of the blinds being drawn. One by one the windows darkened. I lifted my head slightly, watching as he moved with calm purpose, his silhouette lit only by the faint streetlight outside. The soft rustle of fabric, the hush of the night folding in. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Then the light went out. The hum above us stopped and the room fell into gentle shadow. I could still see him, dim and steady as he turned and walked back to me. "Marco?" I asked, though my voice sounded foreign, too soft, too unsure. He didn't answer, only came closer, and then he sat beside me on the edge of the couch again. Carefully, with quiet tenderness, he guided my head into his lap, cradling it as though it were something delicate, worthy. His fingers returned to my hair, slow, sure, as if he'd memorized every strand. He stroked my scalp with patient rhythm, his hands like warm tides drawing me deeper into the dark. I could hear nothing but the hush of our breath. His and mine. Faint and steady, a sound that began to anchor me to the moment while also drifting me farther from everything else. Time slipped away. There was no salon. No uniform. No weight of the world pressing against my shoulders. There was only the warmth of his legs beneath my cheek, the gentle pull of his fingers through my hair, and the strange suspended feeling of being outside myself, like I had entered some quiet in-between where nothing needed to be explained. I didn't feel like his mother in that moment. I felt like a woman, tender and tired, receiving something she hadn't realized she was starved for. Gentle care. Quiet attention. A closeness so raw it silenced every voice in my head that said I shouldn't enjoy this. He leaned down slightly. I felt the soft warmth of his breath on my forehead, the faintest shift of his chest as he exhaled slowly, deliberately. I didn't dare move. I couldn't. My limbs were heavy, my thoughts drifting in and out like clouds that wouldn't settle. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. A sanctuary built from darkness and trust. "You work so hard," he said quietly, as if speaking too loud would shatter something fragile between us. "You carry everything. I wanted you to feel what it's like to let go." My throat tightened, emotion rising before I could stop it. I had nothing to say. Only the truth that sat inside me like a flickering flame. I didn't know the last time someone had wanted that for me. To give. Without expecting. To love even if we hadn't dared to say it aloud. I didn't move. I let him keep holding me like that, let his hands move across my scalp in steady circles. My fingers curled softly against his thigh, not out of intention but instinct, seeking something to anchor me in that ocean of quiet warmth. Stillness wrapped around us like a secret. There were no rules here. No labels. Only the soft beat of his breathing above me, the gentle rhythm of fingers in my hair, and a closeness that trembled just beneath the surface. I didn't want to open my eyes, because for the first time in years I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The dark had grown denser around us, folding the room into a cocoon of half-thoughts and softened boundaries. My head still rested in his lap, and his fingers moved through my hair like they'd been there all along. Every stroke was slow, reverent, grounding me and untethering me at once. I didn't know what time it was. I didn't care. Marco hadn't spoken in a while, but I felt every breath he took, low and steady in his chest above me, brushing faintly against the crown of my head. Then he shifted slightly. His hand lingered, fingertips resting at my temple, still warm. He leaned down and I felt the softest press of lips against my forehead. A kiss, feather-light and wordless. My breath caught but I didn't move. A minute passed, maybe more. I wasn't keeping time anymore. Then came the second kiss. This one lower, grazing the edge of my cheek with a kind of sacred hesitation. Not rushed. Not hungry. But deliberate. I still didn't move. I couldn't. My hands were folded against my chest, my legs tucked slightly inward, and my heart had begun to pound, not from fear but from something older, more tangled. Something I didn't want to name just yet. His breath was close now. I could feel it, warm and shallow. Then came the third kiss. Soft, on my lips. It didn't last long. It didn't need to. The room tilted on its axis and my thoughts exploded into silence. My body went hot and cold at once, a wave of electricity washing through my limbs like I'd stepped into something forbidden and beautiful. His lips pulled away, but his presence didn't. He stayed there, his hand brushing the side of my face, his thumb lingering near my jaw. He didn't speak. Neither did I. I couldn't. Because something inside me had split. Opened. The moment hung in the air, suspended like a secret between breaths. And in its wake I felt everything at once. Pleasure. And shame. Joy so sharp it nearly hurt. And a guilt that gnawed at the edge of it, whispering all the reasons I shouldn't have let it happen. But I had. And not just passively. I had welcomed it. With my silence. With the softness of my breath when he touched me. With the way my heart had leaned into his without permission. I reached a strange kind of peak, not the kind born of desire alone, but one born of being seen wholly in a way I hadn't been in years. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind in my lungs, exhilarated and terrified in the same breath. Marco didn't move away. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and quiet, filled with something I couldn't quite name. I started, but the words didn't come. He didn't press. He only whispered, "It's okay." Was it? I didn't know. But in that moment, wrapped in shadow and silence, it felt like the truth we were both too afraid to say had already been spoken. I stayed there, still lying in the hush of the dark, Marco's lap my pillow, my thoughts a whirlpool of everything and nothing. The air felt heavier now, not oppressive but thick with meaning, every breath a little deeper, every silence a little louder. He shifted again. This time his hands moved gently from my hair to my shoulders and then down. He paused as if giving me a chance to speak, to say no, to retreat, but I didn't. I couldn't. My body had surrendered to the moment, floating in a place where nothing was certain, yet everything was felt. He reached for the small cabinet beside the couch, the one I kept my oils in. I heard the quiet pop of the cap, the familiar floral scent rising between us like memory. Lavender. My favorite. I turned slowly onto my back, heart thudding softly in my chest, and he looked at me. Not like a boy. Not even like a son. He looked at me like a man seeing a woman who had gone unseen for too long. "May I?" he asked softly, the bottle of oil cradled in one hand. I nodded. His palms were warm as he poured just a few drops onto them, rubbing them together slowly until the oil glistened under the faint light seeping through the curtains. Then, with the most delicate touch, he pressed his hands to my collarbones, his thumbs resting just at the base of my neck. I inhaled sharply, not from pain but from the intimacy. From the fact that he was touching me in the one place I carried every burden and never let anyone near. His fingers moved slowly, massaging in small circles, coaxing the tension from muscles that had forgotten how to rest. Downward, he traced the line just above my chest, not with urgency but with reverence. He wasn't exploring, he was caring. And yet it felt like something was opening inside me, something soft and long neglected. My breath deepened. My eyes fluttered closed. With each motion, the warmth of the oil spread through my skin like sunlight, and I felt my heart begin to quiet under his hands. He never moved too fast. Never wandered. His hands were respectful, almost meditative in the way they moved, like he was learning a language he already knew but had never been allowed to speak. I didn't know how long we stayed like that. Time had melted completely. There was no mother. No son. Just the hush of oil meeting skin, the quiet of two people adrift in a moment neither of them could fully explain, and the strange aching peace of being gently, lovingly seen. Eventually his hands stilled. He didn't speak and neither did I. He wiped his hands softly with a towel, then sat beside me once more, watching me with eyes full of silent questions and patient understanding. I couldn't meet his gaze. I was too full. Of heat. Of shame. Of something perilously close to gratitude. But more than anything else, I was afraid. Because a part of me, deep and honest, wanted to stay there forever. The next morning I woke before the sun. The room was still and soft with the kind of hush that settles in right before the day begins to breathe. The events of the night before hung in the air like mist, sweet, strange, and impossible to grasp fully. I sat on the edge of my bed, my fingers curled around a cup of warm tea that Marco had somehow known I'd want even before I asked. He'd left it outside my bedroom door just like he used to leave drawings when he was small. Back then it had been crayons and crooked hearts. Now it was warmth in a mug and silence heavy with questions. I drank it slowly. When I emerged from my room, he was already in the kitchen, barefoot, his dark shirt clinging slightly to his frame as he reached up for a bowl. It was such an ordinary image, so familiar. But nothing about us felt ordinary anymore. He turned as he heard my steps. "Morning," he said, his voice cautious but gentle. "Morning," I replied, feeling my voice catch on something I couldn't name. We didn't talk about the night. Not directly. But everything in the room spoke louder than words could. The way he looked at me a beat too long, the way I couldn't quite meet his eyes, the invisible pull that had now settled between us like an unseen string tying us at the wrists. Later that day, while I was tidying up the studio, resetting the space for the week ahead, Marco appeared again in the doorway. He stood there, uncertain for the first time in a long while. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I nodded slowly, unsure of what would come next. He stepped inside, running a hand through his hair, his cheeks tinged with the faintest blush. "I know this is unusual, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't trust you completely." I waited. "I need a wax," he said, "between my legs. And I don't want anyone else to do it." My breath hitched, not from shock but from the sudden flood of understanding about just how much trust was in his request. He wasn't asking as a boy trying to shock his mother. He was asking as someone who felt safe with me. Someone who'd grown up watching me work, learning how I made others feel comfortable, respected, and whole in their own skin. Still I hesitated. The weight of the request wasn't physical. It was emotional. Everything between us now held a different meaning. I set down the towel I'd been folding and turned to face him. "Are you sure?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, professional even. He nodded once. "I am. I trust you." That word again. Trust. Echoed in my chest. I took a breath and motioned toward the back room. "Hey. Then we'll do this properly." We didn't speak as I prepared the wax and set out the linens. The air was steady, still, and yet charged with a quiet tension neither of us dared name. He undressed to the point needed for the procedure and lay on the table, his body still, his eyes on the ceiling. My hands moved carefully, respectfully. I was a professional and I had done this countless times. But never like this. Never with someone whose every breath I knew, whose heart had once beat against mine before he could even walk. And yet it wasn't just what I was doing that shook me. It was the silence between us, filled with unspoken knowing, with the weight of a bond that had slipped beyond conventional terms. When it was done, I stepped back, removed my gloves, and covered him with a fresh towel. "All finished," I said quietly. He looked at me then, not with embarrassment but with a strange kind of peace. "Thank you," he said, "for not making it weird." I managed a soft smile. "Nothing about us has ever been simple, Marco." He nodded. "But it's always been real." And that, I realized, was what terrified me the most. Because everything that was happening between us felt more real than anything I'd known in years.